Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a list of some books that I can't really stop thinking about, some of which I can't stop thinking about in a favorable way where maybe in the past I put them down, I put the series down, but I'm wanting to give them another try for some of these. They're books that I enjoyed, but then I kind of want to already go back and reread them. And then for some of these, they're books that I maybe originally planned on continuing on with the series, but the more I think on it, the less I want to do that. So just jumping right into it, I'm going to start with one that is more on the positive side, and that would be A Shadow of What Was Lost. I read this a couple years ago. It is one of those fantasy stories that people compare to Wheel of Time, which is not the biggest sell for me because I'm not the biggest Wheel of Time fan. But I picked it up and I actually quite liked the first one, but I didn't love it, and there was nothing that really gripped me. There wasn't necessarily a character that I absolutely adored. The world was interesting, but a lot of it was set up for things to come. It was almost shocking to me that it was only going to be a trilogy because it just felt like it was setting up for something huge, something really grand, something really epic, and I weirdly was saddened at the idea that everything would be concluding in 2 books because it just didn't feel like I was going to get as much as I would expect, seeing as the first one has so much going on and has so many things left unanswered. That said, I did appreciate the creativity. I did appreciate the sense of mystery. I liked the characters, and there was just a lot going on that I had no idea what to make of. So I have seen a lot of people say about the sequels that things in the first book will sort of retroactively, you'll have the aha moments once you read later. And I have seen a lot of people quite like the continuations, the second and the third books. A lot of people really like the trilogy as a whole. So I'm sort of thinking about at some point giving that first book another try. And if I like it well enough, I feel like I should at least go on to the second one, just to at least get further, because it is sometimes with more epic stories necessary to keep going. Sometimes those first books have to lay the foundation so you don't get all the pretty accessories, you don't get to see the finished product, you don't even really get a glimpse of what it's going to be. It's like given a blueprint, and then you'll get the house eventually. It's just the house is going to be made really fast because there's only 2 more books. Next up, we have a book that I read earlier this year called City of Dusk. There's a lot of different perspectives in it, and every single perspective essentially belongs to a different magic system. There's a couple that are related to each other within certain magic systems, but they're all kind of going up against each other, trying to see who is going to become the next ruler. And within these different magic systems, you also have somewhat different cultures because the magic is derived from a certain god or goddess. And so you're sort of learning the ways of people who live in this part of this area versus people who live over here. And they do interact with each other, the characters do, but it's a lot to take in. And so for a while within that first book, there were multiple instances where I was considering DNFing it. Then once it got to a certain point where I felt like my feet were somewhat on the ground, then I was really intrigued and I appreciated just how unique it was and what an endeavor to have so much going on and to have to elaborate so much on so many different things, and for the author to have created all of this, I thought was really admirable. I did find some of the character interactions to feel a little young. The characters themselves are young, so to some degree it is fitting, but it also ends up making the book feel strange because to some degree your brain kind of expects this more epic fantasy to have a certain tone, and it didn't quite have a tone that you're used to, and it didn't bother me because I think something that as reviewers we kind of get caught up in is what a book is supposed to be and what we are accustomed to, and we kind of hold books to a certain standard based off of that as opposed to being open to what's right there in front of us. But at the same time, just because something's a little different, just because something isn't within the norm doesn't mean that you have to like it. And so while I was reading, I was like, it makes sense that they're acting this way. They're young, but then some of the dialogue I didn't love, and it was so much to take in to a point where I'm like, how much of this sat with me? How much of it sunk in? How much of it stayed to where if I were to pick up the sequel when it eventually comes out, would I really be able to appreciate what's going on? Maybe it's just a case of I'd have to reread that first one, but I also think about what it took to get through it the first time because there's so much going on. Next up, we have The Bone Orchard. This book was strange. This book was an experience. When you first pick it up, it absolutely has one of those, what the heck is going on, sort of presentations to the perspectives, to the world. So you're really kind of at a loss at first. And then as you are getting further into it, you're sort of grasping what's happening. It's very interesting. And then as you go, you start to realize that how the book is told is in part due to the trauma that a character has gone through. And I can't say too much else because I don't really want to ruin that experience for anyone else. But that's the thing is, I always describe it as an experience, and it was. And when I think back on it, I actually really appreciate how different it was. And to what I was saying earlier, just because something is different and unique doesn't mean that it's guaranteed to be liked. But I so appreciate the risks that this author took. I so appreciate how unique and how unlike anything else this book was that I kind of can't get it out of my mind. And I almost wonder now that I have certain answers that if I were to go back and read it again, if it would hit different. Because there are some really moving things about it. But I also was so disoriented and it was hard to feel like I was really able to appreciate those harder hitting moments because I was a little in the dark for so long. So without being in the dark so much, I might feel differently. I don't know though. It could be that I'd read it again and I'm like, oh, what a chore. So we'll see. Next up would be The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea. This is a book I read early in the year. It was lovely. When I first read it, that's what I thought. Oh, that was nice. That was a cozy little fantasy story, kind of this little fairy tale feel. And then, I don't know, I keep thinking about it. It was so lovely. And there was so much to it in the writing that was pretty, in the way in which your family and your ancestors play a role in who you are and your relationship with them. When you can feel it, it almost seems like a tangible thing, even though it's not. It's an emotion. It's something that is this connection that you cannot see, but you feel. And I really liked those themes within it. The mystery side of it too was kind of fun to uncover. Some of the reveals are not all that surprising, but still were nice. I don't know, it was just a nice reading experience. And I don't know, maybe I just want another nice reading experience because it was delightful. And I just want to read it again. Next up, Dark Rise. This is somewhat Arthurian feeling, and it was a young adult story that I think I could easily see this being somewhat considered new adult, not because there's a lot of sexual content, which is something that a lot of people, that's what they think when you hear new adult. Nothing like that. It just kind of sits in this in-between place where the world building itself felt a lot more detailed and a lot more mature than what I see in a lot of other young adult books. It's definitely not, though, I would say, an adult fantasy necessarily, so it is an in-between. The downside to this one for me was that it felt a lot more plot-driven, and it felt almost lore-driven to some degree. I know that's not really a thing, but that's kind of how it came across. And I have said so many times, a very character-driven reader. There is something to how the story is told where it makes sense that you don't feel extremely connected to the characters, and then when you realize why, that's definitely something that I can appreciate, and I can see why the author utilized this certain detachment, I'll say. But I also found that throughout the reading experience that I had that sense of detachment, and that was a little unfortunate for me. It meant that I never felt all that emotionally invested. And so even though I appreciate this book and I think it's quite good, I'm also not sure if I want to keep going. And then last for today would be Priory of the Orange Tree. So this is somewhat full circle to Shadow of What Was Lost, because within what I was saying about Shadow of What Was Lost, I was describing how it felt like, how can I possibly get everything I need for this story to feel satisfying with only 2 more books? And when I started Priory of the Orange Tree, I thought, how could I possibly get a satisfying ending with just this book? There's so much to it. And I get that it's a chunky girl, but it's still, I just felt like there was so much setting up. And I was weirdly saddened the further I was reading that it seemed like I was getting closer and closer to this obvious, inevitable end. And I think that's kind of silly of me. I think I should have just kept going with it. I really also think that because I was trying to pick this one up while I was traveling, that definitely played a role in my putting it down. And when I did put it down, I even said it's not that I would never give this another try. I definitely couldn't see myself picking this up again. And I've been feeling that itch to pick it up again, especially now that there's a sort of, I believe, prequel. I'm not all that in the know about this next one that's coming out, but I know it exists in the same world. Especially with there being more to the world, I think that sort of puts away some of those concerns. That's it for some fantasy books that I kind of can't stop thinking about. I'm curious if you've had similar experiences before where maybe you DNF'd a series but now you really want to come back to it, or you read a book and you just want to pick it up again, or maybe you read something and the more you sit with it, the more your feelings are kind of unsettled and you're still thinking through what exactly you thought about it. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.